You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible.
It's really great to meet you. So I recently saw Harriet and was extremely excited. One, because of the strength of the film in and of itself, but also because it's a history that needs to be told. One that sadly a lot of people across this country don't necessarily know. So the film unlocked a lot of things, not only for me, but I think has the potential to do that once it opens for a variety of people of all ages and demographics across this country. What are some of the main things that made you want to be interested in being a part of it?
Well, it's funny because I took a meeting that I thought was a general meeting, and the producer kind of sprung it on me, and instantly my heart started to race because it was very intimidating, but it was also incredibly exciting. And I thought, well, this is a story I've heard of people trying to do this story for a long time, and if I can be part of telling it, and bringing her to the audience. That's what I was striving for, to really kind of get you next to who Harriet really was. Then, that was something worth doing.
And how do you think you were able to dig into that? We know that there are several different biographies that we've read over time or seen get highlighted through the course of history. But I think that there was a lot touched on within the film that made it feel like there was a oneness with her character and who she was. So how do you feel like you were able to harness that? How do you feel that the film was able to really bring that out?
I mean, extensive research. I did extensive research, so I read everything. And very quickly, I began to kind of commune with her. Really, it started, I would just call her name, before I went to bed first thing in the morning. But then as I'm immersing myself in the research, she came to be very, very vivid to me. And I tried to bring that vividness into the movie. And Cynthia as well. Cynthia and I talked about it, and, we studied her face, and we talked about her voice and how her voice sounded and where it would be placed, and what her singing voice might sound like. And we really tried to invoke her, we tried to commune with her and to bring her to through Cynthia into the movie for the audience.
And what do you hope that people will gain post seeing the film? What are some of the thoughts that you have about what people will walk away from theaters with?
Well, I want them to have a greater understanding of who she was and a pride, she's our hero, and to be inspired by her courageousness and her force of will, because I think that we have to believe in our own power to change things and to do right in the world. I think it's easy to become overwhelmed and just to feel like, okay, I'm just going to give up. I'm going to back away. I'm just going to, brainlessly surf, the internet and try and stay entertained like it's a survival instinct. But what I want you to understand is that one person can really make tremendous change if you're courageous enough.
Harriet is very different from a lot of films in the American version of the slave film genre. One, you have a heroine who remains a heroine from beginning to the end of the film, but also there is no white savior in this movie. Throughout thinking about what it was going to look like, we've seen several movies where there is a white savior cast, and we've heard, from the Black community, and very, I think righteously so, a lot of upset around the fact that happens to be a key theme in a lot of movies surrounding slave life. Why was that, or why do you feel that was something that was not included here? Something that really focuses on the heroism and the strength that Harriet had, more so than focusing on other characters.
Well, this is a woman that had tremendous agency and against all odds, and in a hostile environment. So I certainly wouldn't want to take away any of Harriet's agency. And she didn't need a white savior. There were many wonderful people that she worked with and came across and that were helpful to her, that worked in the Underground Railroad. But another thing I wanted to make clear about the Underground Railroad was that wasn't a bunch of white saviors either. There was whites and blacks working together for a cause, which is what's so beautiful about it. It really was a civil rights movement. It was a movement of people working together, a network of people that included, abolitionists of all colors.
I think that even I was born in Chicago but raised in the South. With the teaching going through public schools there, a lot of the information you hear about the Underground Railroad does include a lot of faces that don't look like mine. So the idea is that you have all of these people who were do-gooders who were out to help in slavery, but they weren't necessarily former slaves or freed Black people themselves who were building the strategy and doing the work in that sense and going back and forth and making sure that they were able to cast the veil of freedom for their people. So I think that this movie in and of itself recast a lot of what we have been taught in history classes growing up in this country.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was part of what was exciting about it. You know, certainly the Quakers were almost saintly in there. I mean, the Quakers, it was beautiful what the Quakers were able to do for the abolitionist movement and how they were so fearless. But there were many, many Blacks working with the Underground Railroad. It was a huge network of people. And you know, I really love, for instance, bringing Reverend Green into the story. Such a wonderful character and was a very important person in Harriet's life and just a really interesting person, you know. But the Underground Railroad was so kind of secretive and intricate that Harriet didn't know that her own father was working for the Underground Railroad.
In regards to casting, obviously this film has a very strong cast and a cast that was able to encapsulate so much of the history, but also a strong understanding of the characters that they portrayed. How do you feel that the casting really helped to drive home not only Harriet's story, but also those who helped to make her story possible?
Yeah, it was super important to me. I mean, I think that one of the things that we were really trying to portray was all the differences and intricacies of African American life and the lives of those people, Black and white. That you have that Black Southerners and white Southerners and African American enslaved people and free people were different and yet, you know, very, very connected and living together almost in communities that were side by side. That was super interesting to me. And so, you know, differentiating them from the abolitionists, only 100 miles away, but the abolitionists who are kind of, when you read their writings and you see photographs of them and how they were dressed, they were almost more Victorian than Victorian. They were so pulled up and eloquent. And it was kind of a stunning difference between Harriet, who was illiterate, you know, and a very, very simple in many ways. And so to contrast her with, you know, with the character of Marie, played by Janelle Monáe.
How do you do? How do you do? Good. We're confident, composed, wise enough to know not to look a strange white man in the eyes. You don't want no trouble.
You know, that was super exciting to me. You know,
in an era in our history where you see so much of a racial divide, what do you think this film has the possibility of bringing to audiences?
Well, at least let's try and understand it, and let's try and understand that the resistance of African Americans, the history of resistance in our country. I think that there's still some mythology around, you know, around slavery as if it were benevolent or somehow people weren't really always trying to escape. But this is a story of somebody who was willing to die to be free. And that is it's a very human concept, and it's a very American concept. And I think that that's something we need to remember. That none of us were content in slavery. That is a myth. There was a great resistance, a huge resistance, and the mythology of contented slaves. You know, one of the things that I love about the movie is the communication with song. That was very much a part of Harriet's story. But that, you know, the slave owners saw slaves singing in the field and thought they're happy. But actually it was intricate, very sophisticated form of resistance communication.
And not to give any part of the movie away for those who have not watched it yet, but because this is a historical note that is already available, my next question is in regards to how this film actually reshapes or, you know, rediscovers the idea of being a woman who was a leader. And I say that because during all of Harriet's travels back and forth and these very risky journeys from the North to the South, she was able to do this. And the assumption was that she was male. They created an entire character around who they were going to find and who they were searching for, because a woman would never be able to do all of this. And especially not a woman who's illiterate, a woman who had a physical disability. They just did not see this as something that should be capable of doing. So how do you, when you're thinking about framing of this, what this means for women in general, and I would probably argue she's one of the earliest members of the women's movement before we actually had a women's movement.
Right. I mean, I think that that's super important. And to realize that she was one of the earliest, members of that movement, and she was African American. You know what I mean? That feminism is also belongs to us as Black women, and it always has. That she was a leader of men as a Black woman, I think it's super powerful. I mean, it's something for us to hold. We have to put these histories out there so that we can embrace it and that we can be fueled by that as well. But the fact is, the Southerners didn't think African Americans were smart enough to organize rebellions, to plan how to go to rescue slaves. It's not just that she was a woman, that she was Black at all. They thought it was a white abolitionist in blackface, because clearly, no escaped slave would be capable of planning, rescues.
At Roland Martin Unfiltered, we tell the stories that you're not necessarily going to always hear in regular media. We want to make sure that Black stories are told, and they are told with the fervor that they need to be to reach the audiences that matter. And we thank you for the hard work that you've done in creating an amazing film and really showcasing our history.
Thank you so much.
I have with me the 2 stars of Harriet, and I wanted to make sure that during this time on Roland Martin Unfiltered, we got to understand a little bit more about you both, as well as the characters that you're representing, and what this means for the current state of affairs in America. So I'm going to start with you first, Cynthia.
Yeah.
You play the lead role.
Yes.
Dynamic woman, Harriet Tubman. You take this to an entirely different level, not only in terms of your understanding of the character, but also some of her inner thoughts and some of the emotions and things that brought her to make her decision, and why she chose to go back over and over again, risking her life. To make sure that she was able to liberate people. What did that mean for you as a woman portraying this role in this time in our nation's history?
It meant a lot. I think that we don't have enough representations of us with agency. And the wonderful thing about Harriet is not just the work that she did and the many times that she came back and the lives that she saved, but it's the agency that she had, the force of will that allowed her to make the choice to run in the first place, to go in the first place, and then to keep coming back. In order to do that, she had to know that there was danger, in her path. She had decided that it was being free or die. She was going to be free or die. That was the long and short of it.
Fear is your enemy. Whoa, easy now.
I'm going to be free or die. And I think that to be able to be a representative of that kind of woman, of that life, is really significant. It's really special. And I don't take it lightly, that's for sure. Yeah.
And how did you get into this character? Because it seems like you brought so much to it. Not only an understanding of her innermost thoughts, but also an understanding of how to relate that to an audience today. And sometimes we've seen there have been some modern twist on a lot of our historical figures that aren't necessarily the greatest representations of them. How were you able, and what did you draw from to be able to portray her in the way that you did?
I think I desperately wanted people to see her as a human being. I think we know of, hopefully most people know of the great work that she did and the danger she put herself in consistently. And we see her as this wonderful superhero who's saved many lives, but I think that we don't get the chance to see her as a human being, as a woman. And that's sort of, for me and for Casey as well, what we really wanted to bring to it. So we did the research, we did the reading, and wonderfully in her story, you see all of the humanity, all of this life, the love that she had for her husband. You don't hear about that very often, but it was a big love. It was the love that she came back for, You learn about how much family meant to her. You learn about the fact that she had the ingenuity to go and hire a lawyer, save the money that she had from Thompson's Farm to take and hire a lawyer to draw up the papers that say that her mother was supposed to be free. Like, that's a person with love and care in her. So you have to inject the role with that. It comes as part of the package. There's a person with spirituality, so I made sure that I made space to go back into myself and figure out where I was in my relationship with God, because I have faith, so that it felt natural to call on that when I was playing her. But it's something that people don't realize, but it is something that she has said herself in the biographies that you read. She speaks about that. And, it's about taking the small things, the facts that you find out, and really filling the broad picture, broad strokes picture that we have of her. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Leslie, I'm going to turn to you for a second. When we talk about the role of Harriet Tubman and those who were also a part of the Underground Railroad and what that meant as it relates to the function, but also the design and how you were able to make sure that people didn't know. Your character in the film is very strong in the sense that he's a leader. This has been going on for years. He understands the level of danger that is potentially there. In addition to having compatriots across various places to assist during the process. After the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act, there is a lot more intensity around fear and what it's going to look like to actually still be able to do that. You draw on that in your role. How do you feel that you were able to reach back and not only showcase how pivotal this moment in history was, but also really be that person who drives home the importance of the work?
Oh man, I mean, I don't even know if it's for me to say how it went, or how it turned out. It was just my job to try to bring home that danger, try to make that real for myself as much as possible. I'm no fan of myself. So I most of the time I feel like, well, thank you. Most of the time I feel like I fall short because these stakes are huge, big old, they're big. And it is not, it's not easy to make yourself feel that danger and that sense of urgency, that they must have been feeling.
Rescuing slaves requires skill and careful planning. It requires reading, Harriet. Can you read a sign or a map? Can you read it all?
I put my attention on trying to hear God's voice more clearly.
Do you know what would happen if you got caught? They would torture you until you pointed them right to this office. You got lucky, Harriet. And there's nothing more you can do.
Don't you tell me what I can't do. I made it this far on my own. God was watching, but my feet was my own. Running, bleeding, climbing, nearly drowned, nothing to eat for days and days. Man, I made it. So don't you tell me what I can't do.
But did my best. You try to, trying to put yourself there. I was drawing a lot on my own relationship with Cynthia, for what William might be feeling, and also what William might be feeling for the people in the network who he's known for so long, and he's known that they've risked their lives. And so you just, you're trying to think of, what if your friends and family, were in danger of being caught and prosecuted or worse.
There's a segment of the African American community that feels as though Harriet should not have been played by someone who's not of African American descent. We've heard those run-ins on Twitter, and there is conversation about what that means. How do you feel in regards to those comments?
I understand them, and I don't mind hearing them, and I don't mind sort of the discussion at all. There's a lot of pain underneath that. There's a lot of people, women specifically, Black women in this country, whether they're performers or not, who feel historically ignored. The fact that this is the first major motion picture about Harriet Tubman being made, these are, so there's pain there, I'll add to that, historically there's been, such a dearth, a lack of our stories being told at all. And so we can sometimes, come, we come, we're facing these problems from the historical, our experience of them. I'm getting to a point, I promise. But what I'll say is when I graduated school, even, a few years ago, there was no Issa Rae, there was no Lena Waithe, Donald Glover, Shonda Rhimes, even Ava DuVernay. Like, these people were not on the scene. And so our stories are being greenlit now. Because there's data that says that they make money. There's data that says they can make money internationally. And so I said all that to say, this is the first Harriet Tubman story being made. It does not have to be the last. There's nothing stopping anybody else from making a Harriet Tubman story. This is the story that Casey Lemons wanted to tell. This is the story that Deborah Martin Chase wanted to tell. This is the actress that they thought would be perfect. I happen to agree, for this version. And I look forward to seeing the Harriet stories that are told after this, the brilliant actresses that will take on this amazing story after this. I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it very much so. And I welcome the discussion. I understand that there's a want and a love for this woman. But we're lucky that we have this film here, this first telling. But I absolutely do not believe that it is the last, or should be the last. And I just hope that it's even just a blueprint for what might come next. I want it to just create a space for many more Black actresses to come and tell this story. Because before being English, before that, I'm a Black woman who wants to tell wonderful stories about other Black women, and Harriet is a wonderful Black woman, and I hope this is just one of those stories that keeps going and going and going.
And thank you both so much. I think that was a perfect note to end on. I encourage everyone to go out and see Harriet. This is an amazing film, and I think the casting is amazing as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. Yep. All right, folks, Life Lux Jazz Experience taking place in Cabo, November 7th through the 11th next week. Yours truly will be there. We want you to be there as well. Go to lifeluxjazz.com, LIFELUXEJAZZ.com. 14 acts, Gerald Albright, Kirk Whalum, Average White Band, Shalea, Ronnie Laws. I mean, it's going to be jam-packed. Now, here's the deal. If you can't go, I understand. But you can also participate by getting the live streaming pass from GFNTV.com. GFNTV.com. $10.99. You'll get to see all of the concerts over the course of 3 days. It's fantastic. Oh, did I tell you that GFNTV.com, Black owned? Yeah, as well. And so also, Life Love Jazz Experience, Black owned. The sister created this to provide an opportunity for African Americans who live in a lot of these cold states, even though climate change has screwed that sucker up, to opportunity, of course, to hang out in Mexico for 4 days and have a great time. I'll be doing Roland Martin Unfiltered there next Thursday and Friday from Cabo, but you can experience the concerts by going to GFNTV.com and getting your live streaming pass. So please do so, and we look forward to checking it out. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video.